Welcome back to the Tech Startup Network podcast. Joining me today is Leah Nurik, the co-founder and CEO of Brandi AI, the leading AI visibility and generative engine optimization platform. Nurik launched Brandi in 2025 after recognizing that generative AI was transforming discovery and creating a critical visibility gap for brands. Today, she leads the company in empowering CMOs, product marketers, digital strategists, content creators, and PR leaders with data-driven insights and benchmarks that fuel demand creation, sharpen category positioning, and build brand authority. Leah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ashley.
Yeah,
Definitely appreciate it.
absolutely. As Lee and I were talking about before we began recording, we have not had anyone on to talk about GEO yet, which I know is such a hot topic right now. So I'm very much looking forward to this. But Leah, before we get into all of your advice and expertise, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share with our listeners more about who you are and what you do.
Sure, yeah. I'm CEO of a company called Brandi AI. You can find us at my Brandi, that's with an I dot AI. And what we do is we developed and now and released a platform that does generative engine optimization and AI visibility tracking. And it really helps companies maximize how their brand comes back in AI search results in this new era of AI first marketing. It also has like a suite of optimization tools that help you structure content technically and structured wise, so that that content can be readable. And it also helps you identify what domains and outlets and things like that. If you're a PR professional or somebody looking to do like syndicated content or advertising, of where within your specific market, um, the AI thinks that those domains are the most credible. That's what we do. So we empower marketers and startup founders and anybody who cares about how their brand is surfaced to help them measure, monitor, track, and optimize their presence across all the different AI models.
That's amazing. And especially as I shared, like this is up and coming over the past year or a few years. And so I would love to hear how you kind of found yourself in this area, focusing on GEO and supporting companies.
Yeah, so my background is in product marketing, and go-to-market strategy and public relations and kind of all things marketing and external facing for brands. And I before I started co-founded Brandi AI, I ran a marketing agency for 14 years, and we focused mostly on B2B SaaS companies. And started realizing that, wow, this is a changing trend. And so during the sales process, people would ask, okay, if I do this, how is it going to impact how my brand is surfaced in AI search? And we were kind of like, I don't know, right? So we
Mhm.
started poking around, and then realized that this was definitely like a software platform play, and that so then we built Brandi, and then we spun Brandi. I spun Brandi off all by itself, and now I do that full time with a variety of great team members who are technical and engineering focused, and who've built several different software companies.
Yeah. And so a question I have for you is that since GEO is newer for people who like aren't really ingrained in the space to understand what it is, I think a lot of companies now are starting to think about how they can optimize for generative engines. And so when
Yep.
a company is thinking about that, like what are some first steps that you think that they should take to really kick things off?
I think first you need to know if you're being surfaced at all. So even if you invested a ton of money and time and effort in traditional SEO, and I know a lot of your listeners are newer businesses and tech startups, so they might not have that kind of traditional SEO juice. But even if you did do that, you don't know if you're still coming up. So a lot of companies are still functioning like anecdotally. Like somebody might say, oh, I found you through AI, or they might see, a couple of referral traffic from different models. But so you really need to kind of put a stake in the ground and see not only are you coming back, but what competitors are dominating the conversation? Are you winning, losing? And then what's in the answer? So if you think about like what's the anatomy of the agentic internet, it's, you ask a question and then you get a response. What's in that response is much different than the 10 blue links that you used to get back,
Mhm.
right? So there's sentiment and positioning and sub subtext within the narrative of the response. It's not just a link. So you need to know first what's happening for your brand, but also like within what we call your market universe. So if you're the farmer's dog, right, and fresh dog food, what does that look like, in accordance with, Fresh Pet or Purina or Ollie's, these other brands? Or if you're HubSpot and you're a B2B play, how do you compare to companies like Salesforce or Intercom across your particular universe, because it changes based upon what the context of your market.
Mhm.
So you got to know that first. Then you can do other things to make it better.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like you can't really go into it blindly. You have to know where you stand and where you're benchmarked against other companies, or like you said, if you're even surfacing at all. And then that seems like it'll help you to come up with a game plan from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And so for companies, because you brought up a good point too, that newer companies might not have SEO built up. Have you found that to be a barrier if they're kind of new, or I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I mean, Brandy's pretty new. Brandi AI is pretty new. We only launched publicly in, Q3 of 2025. And we've been able to rapidly come back in the answers. So SEO still matters, because in the sense of if you can't be indexed and found at all, then you can't be found by the AI, right? So you have to have that, like the technical core foundation. But the most important thing is having content on your website that speaks to like question task alignment and prompt citability, and that's really important. But then there's all of these other domains that participate in the conversation. So it's not just pulling from your own website, but perhaps it's different wire services that you can kind of affect it with that, or you can do syndicated content publishing, things like that that can also affect the way you come back, and it can also help you get mentioned much quicker than if you had to wait for your domain authority to get up in the 25s to 30s in traditional.
Yeah.
So there's things outside of SEO that you can do, but you still need to make sure that you have that technical SEO foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it seem like too from what you shared that because you mentioned syndicated content that PR seems to be a really big driver in showing up in LLM. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, so I've heard numbers like I was at this conference and all the people that work for the big PR agencies were saying, 82% of all the citations are earned media. And that's just, it's maybe it's like that for some markets, but not for everything. So if you're like in a B2B market that has these, trade publications and they haven't yet figured out how to get their stuff structured to get found by AI, they might not be showing up at all. But
Hmm.
if you're in a consumer products division and that, the people, those companies that actually like have either partnerships as publications or they've actually figured out how to structure their website for AI, it might come back even more. So it really, again, depends upon the universe. But one of the things that we know to be accurate is that, if the AI can find media and it can determine that it is a publication of note, it will cite from there. But then there's things like I said, like wire services that those are pay. You pay to put out a wire press release on a wire, but like you can utilize those for kind of non-traditional press releases that like target questions and things like that and prompts.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, is just like from what you've alluded to, is looking at multiple sources. So it's not just from what it sounds like, throwing all your eggs in one basket and assuming that one place is where LLMs are going to pull your info from. It's really having that diverse efforts, whether it's your own website, the wire services that you mentioned, PR and press features and things like that. So I think that's a good tip that you've shared is being able to kind of look at all these different sources.
Yeah, and it's making an informed decision about what you do, but it has to also take into account like the authenticity and credibility of what your mission is as a company.
Hmm.
So, there back in the days, there are people like some digital marketers types, who might have been trying to like, game the system, trick the Google into getting you to come back. We don't recommend that because you want to future proof your business. So you want to create stories and content that aligns with what you're producing, as a product. And you can't just focus tactically on like one tiny moment in time. You have to be thinking about this as like an ongoing, living, breathing, dynamic, organic initiative that's,
Hmm.
maybe it starts today, but it's not ending anytime soon. So it's a completely different approach to marketing or digital marketing and visibility than it was 18 months ago when people
Hmm.
were still focused on the blue links and the getting having your link come back, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's, as you mentioned, it's not going away. It's only going to continue to grow. I can't remember what stat it was that I read, but I read something about how like X% number of people are now turning to LLMs to ask a question or do research more than they're turning
Hmm.
to something like Google or Bing or whatever. So I think that's a really good reminder for anyone. It's just like know that people are starting to use ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever, to do their research more than they are doing typical search engines.
Yeah, but even if you go to the traditional Google old paradigm, you're still getting an AI summary that's driven by a different algorithm than it was 2 years ago, which
Hmm.
was more listed on the blue links. Now it's synthesizing your, it's determining your intent, it's synthesizing it, and then it's giving you an answer that it thinks you want, which is different than before. So, yeah, I mean, even if like you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I don't use ChatGPT, that's okay. Because even if a whole bunch of other people do, but it doesn't really even matter because even if you go to Bing or Google, you're still going to get that AI summary that's driven by a new intent-based algorithm. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And on the topic of summaries, I would love to hear the importance of having consistent messaging for a brand to make sure that the messaging that pulls through from the LLMs isn't incorrect or outdated or anything
Oh,
like that.
oh my gosh, you're speaking my language, Ashley. Oh, you're speaking my language because, it used to be people would be focused on a keyword.
Hmm.
I came from a world of market narratives and brand positioning and product marketing. And it was all about that. Like it's all
Yeah,
about like what's the subtext? Like what is the actual value proposition? Is it accurate? Is it misinformed? And I hate to say it, but you will often find a good amount of misinformation in the way that a brand is positioned. But it's good to know about it so you can counteract it. So if you know so we have a very deep sentiment hub in the product. So if that is something like where you can actually configure the type of thematic elements that you want to measure sentiment for, and then you can see all of the positive and the negative, and then you can determine where those citations, like what citations are fueling that narrative. And
hmm,
so once you know that, like for example, we have one customer who's a large software company that's a PE platform. They've done like 10 acquisitions over the past 4 or 5 years or something, all with different brand names, right? And then they went through a big process of doing a rebranding and having everything with the core name of the company. So, rebranding is not an easy feat. It's a big, big thing. And then when they started using Brandy, they were like, why are these brands keep coming back? That brand's from like 7 months ago. Why is it coming back? And it's so they ended up figuring out that they hadn't that there were certain resellers on in their network that hadn't put down like old landing pages. So they hadn't changed the names.
hmm,
So they were able to very easily go back and fix it and say, hey, that's not the product name. Can you please fix it? They were able to identify that. And the other thing was like it was pulling from the G2s of the world and the Gartner reviews and that kind of thing, where they hadn't necessarily put together all of their different products underneath one unified brand yet. And so they were able to do that. They were able to prioritize it, and then they were able to fix that. So it's important to then, identify where it's coming from. Maybe you can fix it, maybe you can't, but then at least you can publish something that is going to displace that. So we
Mhm.
do see that the answers that come back are credible, the most authentic, but also the most recent. So it's really this living, breathing thing. So then, okay, I can counteract that negative like narrative from like training data from 2017 because it hasn't yet recognized a new answer that is more recent, and then you can counteract with that content creation.
Hmm. Definitely. And I love that you've shared this phrase a few times, which is the idea that it's a living, breathing thing. So it's not just like one and done, that's it, I've done it, I'm gonna get all the results that I want, but more so as you've shared, like continuously doing these actions and keeping things up to date to ensure that it's always consistent and always expanding.
Well, and it's also though, right? Like people's pain points change. So your
Hmm.
prospective buyers, they have new problems, right? They have new problems, there's new market evolution, whatever. And so if you're not constantly also like one of the things Brandy does is it does the listening, like active social listening. So it can identify when things have shifted and then make recommendations to you on what you should now produce in order to fill in those gaps. So
Oh,
that's an
yeah.
important thing too. It's not just like, okay, I know my market, I know my product, but now it's okay, well, you're selling pens. All right, well, I know my core audience now has changed their mind about the kind of pen they want. They want it with sustainable materials, and maybe they're getting older and they've got arthritis in their wrists. So now they're on Reddit complaining about that, or
Yeah.
there's a big article, right? So you need to dynamically continue to listen and adapt.
Totally. And on the topic of prospective buyers, that's one thing I'm curious about too, is that like that's one example of an audience that might use an LLM to research your company as prospective buyers or customers. But would companies ever need to think about other audiences that might use the LLM to find them, like maybe candidates if they're hiring or investors or anything like that? I'm curious to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever stakeholder is important to you. So
Hmm.
we have a customer who they're really prioritizing recruitment in certain cities. So they want like one of the things they're tracking in Brandy is how is their brand positioned for potential employees. So
Hmm.
that could be one thing. Or if you want to talk like if it's for investors, and you're going out to raise around and you want to talk about like the hottest new sectors for investment, you might write blogs
Hmm.
about that. In order to surface as potentially a new market category that the investment community isn't looking at, or whatever it is, the stakeholders, you can completely target that and should, because it's your business objectives, right?
Right, definitely. And that's a good reminder there is to not have almost like a tunnel vision on just one objective or goal, but like you sure think about all the stakeholders that might be searching for you using an LLM.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing I'm wondering too is I saw, I believe a few months ago that ChatGPT started rolling out ads. And I think if I remember correctly, it only happens on the free plan and it hasn't rolled out to everyone. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, I would love to hear your what you've experienced with that and if you see ads kind of changing how companies are showing up organically who aren't paying for ads within something like ChatGPT.
I mean, I don't think we know. And I'm not
Yeah.
gonna I mean, we could talk about it and speculate, but I mean, I don't think anybody really knows because one of the things I think about around this is that right now people tend to default to believe the answer, like at least most of the answer. Sure, they might come at it with some skepticism, but if it looks pretty right, it's like, okay, well now if the different models don't do this right, they'll actually just waste all that trust of the user.
Hmm.
And what a gift that they have right now to be trusted. So, they can derail their own their own experience. And I think some may and some might not. Claude is saying it's not going to do that. I mean, Google built itself on advertising. How does that work? And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of talk about it, but and we obviously know the click stream and pay per click and stuff is changing very rapidly, but I don't think we really know how it's going to shake out. So the one piece of advice that I could give is to say you can't keep up with this stuff on your own if you've got another business to run. So find a good partner, like an agency partner who lives and breathes this and is passionate about it and has, like partnerships with the right technology platforms who can advise you because it's going to be changing so rapidly and it can't be done in like part-time, like as like a side. I mean, it can be
Yeah.
done part-time, but it can't be done like, okay, like without tools and people who know what they're doing.
Right. It's like that whole idea of focusing yourself on revenue generating activities and delegate out the rest or outsource the rest to the professionals who can handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so I'm also curious too if social media posts like play an impact on how companies might show up as a source in an LLM. I think maybe it was Adweek that had published an article a month or so ago about YouTube being a huge driver and Reddit, of course, being a huge driver. But I'm curious if you've noticed any big platforms that really make a difference for companies.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is huge, even if
Hmm.
it's like B2C, it's just huge.
Hmm.
So that's working. That works for brands. But what we know is that it works mostly when you post articles that are from like individuals, not corporate pages. In Brandy, we actually have an optimization for LinkedIn articles specifically because they do perform so well.
Hmm.
So you can actually take your blogs and things and then structure them so that they'll be found because the algorithm's different on LinkedIn. But for some of our consumer products companies and e-commerce companies, Reddit is huge. But also you can see certain public Facebook and Instagram posts. So that's a great way. Like we have some companies, some customers that are using that to identify like influencers that they might want to engage with because they tend to get cited more. And then YouTube, yeah, YouTube does great. And that's something that, I mean, I'm not really surprised because it's a Google property, right?
Yeah.
Although I do see it, I see it citing up across all the LLM, like being cited across all, not like it's not predominantly only the Google AI mode and Google AI overview or anything like that, or
Hmm.
Gemini. But yeah, so everything you heard is true. Those are the important ones. And Reddit is it's showing up, but I see it's only showing up on certain models. It doesn't, it's at
Oh,
like crazy high, but
yeah.
not on all of them. So I think and then you also have to think about this too. There's some of the models cite like crazy amounts of citations,
Hmm.
which you wouldn't be able to like look like, okay, you got an answer that's 3 paragraphs long and it comes from Grok, but there's 59 citations. Like, okay, how are they doing that? What's going on in the back with that?
Yeah,
So you have to take some of that, like some of the platform differences with a grain of salt too, I think.
that makes a lot of sense. And on the topic of that, the different platforms and LLMs that exist, this is a very subjective question, but do you tend to have a favorite? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about people jumping ship from OpenAI to Claude for various reasons, but I'm curious to hear if you have a platform that you tend to gravitate towards, or maybe you use different platforms for different reasons. That could be something too.
Yes, I do. I'm not going to take a stand on this, but I will say that I may or may not want to have been one of those people who uninstalled their instance. But
Mhm.
I mean, so they do well for different things. And so like us, we don't standardize on one platform within our product when we're doing stuff. Like we utilize across multiple different platforms because, for example, some are better at, synthesizing large amounts of information. And like if you look at Claude, there's like 3 different layers, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you're going to use Opus versus Haiku and what for. And sometimes what I would do too, when we're doing like prompt engineering in the back, we test it on multiple models and see what the answers are. And then sometimes, like for certain things, you would use Gemini, and then for something else, you might use Perplexity or Claude.
Yeah.
I will say for like the real in-depth kind of stuff, we do tend to use Claude.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Claude. I am not a technical person at all by any means, but I feel like just having Claude Code gives non-technical people the opportunity to do some really cool things without having those types of skills.
Yeah, and it's really affecting the startup community too, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
the acceleration for innovation. I mean, it's so cool how, you can have like this is even the case, this is the case for us within Brandy. We have our product team is comprised of, we've got product management, and of course we've got dev, and then you've got me. Well, I'm not a developer at all. And then we've got our customer support people and our sales people, and we come to these meetings and we've mocked stuff up. We're like, this is what we're
Hmm.
envisioning. And it's such a great way to ideate very quickly. And it's pretty cool that when, you're saying like, you're not technical, that here you are now, like, you're straddling all these different roles that used to
Yeah.
be so siloed, and it would stop innovation from happening because it's like, that person's the keeper, that other person's the keeper of like being able to push this over the finish line. And I can't necessarily impact it. All I can do is yell the loudest or speak up the loudest. Now you can say, no, this is what I need. Right. And so
Mhm.
I think it makes products more innovative because you can take domain experts who couldn't traditionally do stuff like that and who can say, no, this is what I mean.
Yeah.
And communicating with more technical or different minded type of people as creatives is, something that's always been a little bit of an issue in a lot of software companies. And I mean, that
Mhm.
a lot of that barrier is gone now.
Yeah, 100%.
What are you
And
building? I'm curious now.
so I
What did
work in
you build
marketing.
yesterday?
Yeah. I work in marketing. I do a lot of social media for tech companies, and one of my clients was interested in analyzing their X followers, and I had not been able to find a tool to date that could do that. And so I used Claude Code to be able to analyze that and see. I mean, I couldn't get because of X's API get as granular as I'd like to be without paying a stupid amount of money to have their API, but from a
Yep.
basic standpoint was able to kind of understand like people's general industries that they worked in, like classifying the followers, things like that. So it wasn't super in depth, but even just having information like that that I wouldn't have had otherwise, I thought was really interesting. So, and I've heard people like building all types of things using Claude Code, and even people are like, yeah, just this weekend, just for fun, I built this on Claude. And so it's just really cool, like you said, to see all the innovation that's coming out of it.
Yeah. Are you like, oh, okay, I got a 2 hour flight. I'm just going to ask Claude to do this. Going to get on, binge watch some old Seinfeld episodes when I get off and be like, oh, what did Claude do while I was on the flight?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gives it the opportunity to open up so much time and resources for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so interesting. But one question I have for you, and I know you've like shared such good advice throughout this whole episode that I'd love to string together, which is, what do you think in 2026 companies need to do in order to enhance their AI visibility and be successful with it?
I think that they need to start figuring out if they're coming back, where they're coming back, why they're coming back. And then
Hmm.
they need a strategy to impact it. So even if you are coming back, it doesn't mean you're going to come back in a week.
Hmm.
Because when somebody else gets the most recent, better answer to that question, you're out of luck. So this is when you're taking a look at where you're gonna put spend, this like your digital budget needs to evolve into this. It's
Yeah.
still inclusive of SEO, but like for example, you can have product marketing who's getting insights from it. How are you positioned, right? Like we were talking about that. What's my visibility metrics that are going to replace keyword targets? Okay. That's also driven by geo and AI visibility. Third is, what about all my agency partners, or even if I have one, like a PR agency or a web development agency who can go in, generate code, like tracking codes and schema and all those things using like a robust suite, and just get everybody. working and focused on GEO that has any impact on revenue,
Yeah.
because that's the new world. So it's really a mind shift, I think. And I think that, just the acceleration of who knew about it and who's now, like, how many deals there are that are going on and talking about this. I mean, yeah, I would say, like, in December, there was a lot of like, okay, yeah, that's cool. We want to experiment. Let's see. And now it's like, okay, everybody's like, okay, I got to do this. If I don't do it now, I'm going to miss my opportunity. I'm going to, not be able to take advantage of, like, like quick revenue in this calendar year. So
Yeah.
I would say that it's like a mind shift,
Mhm.
like a different way of approaching marketing.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like if any of us have learned anything from marketing is that it's always changing. And so we're kind of having to stay on top of what's working now might not have worked last year and vice versa. So I love that reminder is just to really stay ahead of the curve and know how it can work for your company.
Yeah, and that's why, having partners like you and other agency partners who are staying on top of it is really, I think it's going to mean a big shift back to the agencies,
Hmm.
because just like there was, like, with SEO, and or like, with popularity of PR during some of, the growth cycles that we had. I think you're going to see something very similar, because in any new space, it's the people who are the experts at it that, they're going to, like, guide their clients along. So I think that there's a really large opportunity for marketing services companies, which is not something I would have said like 2 years ago at all.
Yeah,
It seemed kind of
absolutely.
like it was going down, and
Yeah.
now it seems like it's going back up. And I think Gartner came out and said that, through 2028 they expected doubling every year of the spend on PR and earned media.
Interesting. But it makes a lot of sense exactly to your point. Like we see it going up and the need only increasing from here.
Yep.
Yeah. And now for a fun question, Leah. I always love to ask our guests to give a shout out to someone in tech who's doing something cool right now that they really admire. So it could be a tech founder, VC, consultant, community builder, really anyone is fair game, but would love to hear who you're feeling inspired by lately.
Yeah, there is this really cool company called, Revenue Growth Agent, and they have utilized the power of AI to make this, like, B2B sales process super streamlined.
Mhm.
And it's great. Like, what they're doing is just, it cuts out, so it makes you so much more efficient as a salesperson, but it also comes from a place of, like, authenticity and actually solving the prospect's needs instead of only thinking about your product.
Oh,
And I
wow.
think that sales is really changing. Like, when I
Mhm.
first started my career, it was kind of like, hey, the back pad and the relationship and the big dinners in Vegas and that kind of thing. And I just don't think that B2B sales is like that anymore. I think that,
Mhm.
people buy from trust. It's not just a handshake and a wink, wink, and it shouldn't be. It's about authenticity and mission and really, really solving problems. And
Mhm.
that's really how we built our product. So I feel very mission aligned with what they're doing at Revenue Growth Agent, because when I can look at their product, it's telling me what is the pains and how does Brandy fix them,
Yeah.
like their pains based upon their unique experience of that company, of the history of that person and where they are. And I don't look at it as a, tricky. I look at it as a way for me to help connect with those people to help solve those problems. And
Yeah.
I think that that's really cool. So you guys should check them out.
Yeah, that's a good shout out. And now I would love to give you the opportunity to plug yourself. So for our listeners who are interested in learning more about Brandy AI and how they can take advantage of what you offer, please feel free to share where our listeners can find you online.
Okay. Yeah. Just love plugging Brandy. So come visit us at mybrandy with an AI. Sign up for a demo, and we can help you kind of identify where you're showing up in AI search and then what you can do to make it better. And we love the tech community. We feel a lot of your your frustrations and your joys. So you will find a good customer relationship in the Brandi team.
Yeah, amazing. And I'll include a link to your website in the show notes so our listeners can easily find you from there. But Leah, thank you so much for coming on today's episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Ashley.